Welcome to this meet and greet session of the SURE EuroDelta, our network of cities and regions in the EuroDelta, and we have our monthly meet and greet meeting with interesting presentations. And as a network, we are working on a proposal on circular economy in the construction sector. And we had some months ago a very interesting presentation at the province of South Holland on circular economy in the construction sector, focused on bio-based materials, in Dutch from land naar pand, so from the rural area to buildings. And we are very happy that we have the people that presented that in that session today here to present their outcomes of a big research they did. They will give the presentation yet in English to this selected group of people. So Daan Groot of Natuurverdubbelaars. So how do we translate it? Doubling nature. You are an expert in calculating the business case or the benefits. We have our the two people who are going to present. Daan will start. Maybe Philomene, you can present yourself.
Yes, so hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm so happy that you are all here and that we got this nice invitation of you guys and this wonderful team of the EuroDelta group. My name is Philomene van der Vliet. I'm a landscape architect and I'm founder of Boom Landscape. It is a landscape architectural office based in Amsterdam. And we make designs for public space, but also we do research. And in this case, we made a research for 3 provinces. And I think Daan will start the presentation.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself while you put on our slides, Philomene.
Yeah, I think I will share it right now.
So my name is Daan Groot. I'm the founder and director of Nature Square. We're a project office on the nexus of ecology and economics. So we look throughout our projects at the value of nature and how can you capture that value and how can you use that value to go in towards different kind of decision making. And today we present a very interesting project.Maybe you can go back to the first slide, Philomene, for 1 second. So a brief introduction on the project as a whole. Just finishing my introduction as well. So I'm also a professor on business models for regenerative agriculture. And as a company, we work on topics in the rural areas, in green cities, in value chains, and in finance. And today we bring you a research that we did over the last maybe 2 years or so on bio-based farming. There's a huge interest at the moment in making building and the whole building sector more sustainable. And at the same time, there's also a huge opportunity for the agricultural sector to collaborate on that and to be a force in that, while the agriculture sector has a lot of its challenges themselves as well. And in this research, we're really looking into how can you combine those challenges and how can you go actually from 2 problems to 1 solution. And that was really interesting. So Boom Landscape and we worked together on this. And then, yes, please move forward. So why were we starting this research? First of all, there's this huge need for building clean and circular housing. I'm not sure how it is in all of your metropole regions, but at least in the Netherlands, and I assume it's quite similar. There's a huge need for new construction, new houses. A lot of people are looking for a house. but we do want to do that sustainable. At the same time, we're very much concerned about, first of all, reaching the Paris climate goals, but also reaching a lot of other goals with regards to biodiversity, with regards to the landscapes that our cities are situated in. And in this research, we actually bring all that together. Next slide. And we did that under the beautiful Dutch rhyme of rekenen en tekenen, which means that we, at the same time, in an iterative process, looked at the math and economics behind such a new perspective, as that we did a more design-oriented research. And that was a really nice combination between our two offices, where we had both a lot of experience and knowledge about the visual side of things and the spatial, how to also design an inviting landscape and a landscape that you want to be in on one hand, and on the other hand, on our side, also a clear understanding of how do agricultural companies and farms work and what is feasible, and how can you, in designing a landscape, also already take into account what works for farmers and what doesn't work. And in the end of it, if we have that inviting landscape, that helps us with a lot of challenges. What does that mean for farmers? And is that an interesting perspective for them? And if not, which are the buttons that we can still push to also from a policy standpoint, make sure that the future that we want to have also becomes a feasible future. We did this in a number of regions and also with a lot of partners. So first of all, we work together very closely with the province of Zuid-Holland and the province of Flevoland. And we also work together with the College van Rijksadviseurs, which is an independent advisory organ to the Dutch government. And they also were very much involved together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, or of the domestic. I'm not sure how you would say that in English, but so we had a lot of people who were really curious about the outcomes, because for each of these governments at a national or regional level, it really coincides with a lot of the challenges that they have. So they were really, really eager to hear our outcomes, and also very eager to take them further, which is why we also have a big, let's call it a roadshow, where we go and present our outcomes to different audiences, such as today. But it's great that we have the opportunity today, and we hope that we can both give you a lot of insight in the dynamics of this, about that there is actually a very appealing future ahead of us, but we do still need to make some steps, and also what your role as a metropolitan region could be in making sure that that future is actually our future. So that's what we want to share, some ideas, some research outcomes with you today. Can we? Yeah, maybe this is the moment for you, Filomena.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Dan. So maybe to start with, today we will be focusing on one of the projects or one of the researches that we did, because otherwise it will take all day, since we have so much to tell about these research projects. But we focus on the Nieuwkoopse Plassen in the province of Zuid-Holland. And as you can see in purple, you see the peat soils of Zuid-Holland. And the Nieuwkoopse Plassen, which is a Natura 2000 area, so natural reserve, and a polder in the heart of it. So this region is actually in the green heart and between big cities such as Utrecht, Gouda, and Amsterdam. And you can say that maybe this kind of peat soils is the worst of all soils. It's very weak soil. It is really hard to grow bio-based products on it, especially forests. Here you can see how this landscape has developed over time. So for a long time, it used to be peat soil only, and then we start mining it for fuel. We start mining the peat soils. And in the right corner, you can see how we dig out basically the polder for turf. The ring structure is actually soil that was so bad that it wasn't even good enough to use for fuel. But over time, this is also why this landscape developed and looks so different. So we have a polder in the middle, peat soils on these edges, and then the Nieuwkoopse Plassen as a natural reserve on the sides. And as you can see, if you just see and look at what the potential is of these ecological biotope, you see that in every successive stage of this landscape, you see wet forest, you see these low lakes with the kranswieren. As a biotope and ecological system, it is really a beautiful landscape, and with lots of crops or bio-based crops in potential that you could use for building. But as you dive into this landscape and look closer what it looks like today, then you can see that over time, this is the 95% of this landscape is just used for protein-rich grass, which is used, of course, as food for cows, Engels rijgras, which is quite shocking. So this is what 25% of our landscapes in the Netherlands look like today. And you can say that only 1.5% of this of the value of this cattle farm is actually exported. So so more than 1/4 of the Netherlands is used for dairy industry, and it represents only 1.5% of all the products that are exported in the Netherlands today. So it is really actually quite strange. It is a big industry, but it is also has a big effect on our landscapes. So on the south side of this page, you can see that the bee diversity, as we call it, you can see that around the lakes of Nieuwkoopse Plassen, that the bee diversity is pretty high. So this is the natural reserve, Natura 2000. But in these Engels Rij polders, you see that the bee diversity is almost nil, which is, yeah, of course, the bee diversity is also symbolic for the ecological and biodiversity in this region. So if there's no good biotope and no food for bees, then of course there's almost no bees, but almost the bees on its own are food for birds, for instance. So the whole pyramid of ecology is actually disappearing in this region. And this is actually what the landscape looks like today. So you can imagine that biodiversity is almost nil in this landscape. And as a result of that, you can see that ammonia emissions, so of course these are emissions from cows, are putting a huge burden on this natural reserve. So you can see around Zevenhoven and Meijepolder that it exceeds these emissions, and as a result, it has a huge effect on nature and the quality of nature in Natura 2000 area around the Nieuwkoopse Plassen. Same for the deposition of nitrogen. So as soon as you have too much nitrogen emission, it has a huge effect on the plants that grow here. So you get a dominant ecological system in which plants that are not really, like say, common in this kind of region are more dominant than others. Which makes and results in a poor quality of nature around the Nieuwkoopse Plassen. And same for soil subsidence. So these polders are one of they have a huge, they are suffering from soil subsidence, and you see here two scenarios. On the top, you see, let's say the more optimistic scenario in which they predict that in 2050 soil subsidence will be up to 60 centimeters. But they expect actually that it's because of climate change, these soil subsidence will be much worse over time. So it will exceed all the way up to 65 centimeters of soil subsidence till 2050. And as a result of that, we have, it will cost the society a huge amount of money. So they just, Planbureau voor de Leefomgeving has calculated on this topic, and they say that over time till 2050, it will cost society 22 billion euros as damage from soil subsidence. So basically, that means that, for instance, foundations will be harmed. We are suffering from damage to roads, for instance, but also CO2 emissions are causing huge problems. So yeah, you can also say that the effects and the costs of these emissions, it is putting a huge burden on the climate goals of Paris, of course, but also, yeah, let's say on the damage that it will cost our society. So on top of that, you can see in red that the water quality in this region is also pretty bad. In general, in the Netherlands, the quality of our waters are problematic. But here, due to an increase of nutrients, we see that these waters colors, that we have some big issues, especially in the Natura 2000 reserves. Yeah, one of the problems actually is that also this biotope, that there's a dominant species of cormorants, basically, and there's so much nutrients also because they put a heavy burden, and because there's so many birds, they shit in the water, and it's actually putting the whole quality of this water yeah, in danger. And on the bottom of the page, you can see the drought stress in the deeper clay soil, so in the polder, but also on the flanks of the rivers, where you can actually, where also the harvest is quite poor because of this drought. And you see that our summers are getting hotter. So this problem is even getting worse and worse over time. So what we did actually is we piled up all these environmental issues, and we collected them all in one map. And we use this map also to see what would be a good start for a transition in this for bio-based crops. Because you can imagine that even the farmers that are currently working in these areas are already yeah, suffering from decreasing incomes. So also for them, and yeah, with this in mind, that nitrogen emissions are putting this huge burden on Natura 2000 reserves. This would be maybe a good start also to think about a transition, and a transition in a different use of farming and a different, yeah, let's say, product. So what we want is to change basically these environmental burden on this natural reserve. Causing drought, too heavy burden of nitrogen emissions on Natura 2000 reserves, the loss of biodiversity, peat oxidation, and let's say the whole methane emissions of cows. And you can see that last week, it was already in the papers that the first farmers already heard from the government that they need to leave this or sell their farms because of the nitrogen prices. So what we want is, of course, that we think so that to sell out that that we don't need less farmers, but actually we need more farmers. So there's no plan B. So after when these farmers are sold out, or the government is buying their land, there's no plan what will happen to these landscapes after they're gone. And actually, we think we don't need less farmers, but even more farmers also to take care of these environmental issues. So from a finite production system, we really think that bio-based crops could also be an answer to make a very productive layered landscape in which, let's say, the bio-based productions is one of the layers, one of the production layers, but you can also think of buffering rainwater to prevent the drop in the deepest polders. You can also think about increasing biodiversity, for instance, or adding recreational use to these landscapes. So what we don't want, of course, is change and replace the monoculture of Engels rye and the monoculture of livestock farming, and to replace it by a monoculture of bio-based crops. But you have to replace it by these multi-layered landscapes in which you also add ecosystem services to it. So actually, this is actually the strategy that we use for all our researchers. So from a finite production system, where you can see that already they cause huge environmental issue and a huge environmental burden on our landscapes. We want to stack actually values to it and turning the productive landscape also in a regulating landscape and in a rich ecological landscape, and also add recreational use to it. And here you can see what it would mean if you do this. So for instance, you see here how beautifully this peat ribbon, and also it is the center between our big cities. So for instance, it is very well connected to the Amstelscheg in the north, one of the wedges of Amsterdam, but also Utrecht is working on wedges that are connecting the inner cities to the landscape. So if you develop this bio-based crop landscape, it could also be this beautiful recreational structure between our big cities, and also, let's say, making this kind of dynamic mosaic landscape connecting the big cities to this production landscape. And what we did is that we made an overview of the most, let's say, promising crops. Of course, there's many more crops to be thought of, but this is actually the crops that Dan also started calculating with. And on the left, you see the wooded bogs. So those are the most, let's say, enclosed landscapes. And on the right, you see paludiculture. So those are the most wet landscapes. And if you put these water levels up, you can also prevent peat soils from oxidating and releasing CO2 emissions. Let's say, harvest bio-based crops at the same time. And for each and every of these crops, so on the left you see the forest, the wet forest, and on the right you see osier. So basically they're salix plantations. For each and every one of them, we made a fact sheet, so you can see how you could use these plantations in the region, but also what the value cases and the business cases are. So how can we combine these crops also with, for instance, ecosystem services? So for instance, in this case, you want to buffer rainwater and you can release it in the deeper polders when it's when the climate and when it's super dry, for instance. You can use it for water purifications, and you see more below, you see also the business case. So how much crops can you harvest from this field, and how can you use these softwoods also for construction materials? So we did this for each and every one of these crops, and we also show, of course, the ecological potentials. So for which animals can we do something? It is very important that I already mentioned that we don't want to, let's say, replace one monoculture for the other. So you can't really harvest in a very common way. If you want to improve ecology, you have to do it very carefully, and yeah, also, for instance, leave some material on the fields for birds and bees, so they can still they still have food, they still can take shelter. So actually, it is quite important that yeah, that you take measurements for these to provide space for all these layers, for recreational use and also for ecology. And then on the bottom, you see also the ecosystem services, how much CO2 you are actually buffering in these crops. So I will continue. So we did the same for reeds and for cattail. I'm having some difficulties with that. Yeah. So. And yeah, so for Dan also to be able to calculate, we made a few scenarios developing this transition in the landscape. So on the left side, you see scenario 0. So this is that is actually the current situation. And then scenario 3 in the right bottom is the most radical scenario. And we use this also to calculate on the effects of the crops and what would be a business case for the farmers, but also what would be a value case. So what if you also add ecosystem services and you just pay the farmers for this? And would it be a business case for farmers? Because yeah, the most important question is why don't farmers already take this step? And how can you improve the quality of our landscapes? And yeah, here you can see the results of these scenarios. So on the left, you see the current scenario. You see that 90.
I think we have to go speed a little bit up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I will. So on the left, you see the 95% of Engels rye. And on the right, you see that this mosaic is already start working. So you see the richness of all the crops, diversifying the landscape. And here, I think you also can see, yeah, the potential. So you see that how hard it is to make a very profitable business case out of it. I think Dan will also explain it to you later. But more important, you also see when you go to the radical scenario that 90% of the stickstoff, so this CO2 emissions, is also actually absorbed by this new crop. So this is also the reason why the current farmers don't take the step and switch to produce bio-based materials. So you see in orange, you see the total income of farmers decreasing if you go towards scenario 3. But on the other hand, you also see that the reduction of CO2 emissions is actually radically going upwards. So if we start paying for these CO2 emissions, and for instance with carbon credits, then you could actually, it would be a very interesting way to compensate for the income loss for these farmers. So actually here you can see, so from a very poor ecological desert, we slowly move upwards towards a productive landscape in which we put the levels up and we have bio-based crops with regulating landscape in which we store rainwater that we use to prevent drought in the deeper polders. We make a recreational landscape in between the big cities. And the nice thing of today is that both we bring back these old landscape elements that used to be here, such as osiers and coppice forest. Maybe it's good just to go quickly through them. So here you can see what we, of course, the whole idea is that we try to harvest bio-based products from it. So here you can see which products are actually can be used to build these new housing. So you can actually make a full house out of these landscapes. So this is, for instance, a proposal, or actually the products that come from clay soils. And then we also made this quick calculation how many houses you can produce out of these clay soils and from wood, even not taking into account the products, for instance, for insulation. We also did the same research based on the same strategy for the clay polders. This is, for instance, the Noordoostpolder. Very different, of course, because this hardcore clay polders is functioning quite well, if you consider so they can continue, farming in the old way for more than 100 years. But also here you can see that it would be good also, for instance, to go into this or move towards this wider crop rotation, and that will actually improve our soils in a tremendous way.
I showed our landscapes are under a lot of stress, pose a lot of challenges, and those landscapes are also really important for our cities. At the same time, we're looking for a lot of construction materials, and there's a huge opportunity to combine these two challenges. But what's in our way, why is that future that we like to see is not our current future of tomorrow yet? And that really comes down to a lot of the calculations that we did. Philomena already showed a little bit about it. But what you actually see is that even, or maybe not surprisingly, though these are much better production systems from an ecosystem perspective, they provide a lot of services to us as a society when it comes to climate adaptation, when it comes to clean water, beautiful biodiverse landscapes. They just don't make enough for a farmer, which is a really cynical thought, but also something that we're in the midst of a transition in the agricultural system, which also we have some answers to and some opportunities. So one of the key things that we see is, for example, when you start pricing in the value of reduced carbon emissions or the value of actually carbon sequestration, the value case is already really, or the economic business case already really improves. So for some of the scenarios and some of the cases that we did this research in, the business case is almost on par already with conventional agriculture, just by taking in the value of climate. And then there's so much other ecosystems services that are also there. For example, we're in the crisis of nitrogen in the Netherlands. This can contribute a lot to that as well. And we haven't even calculated that because that is still very unsure what's the value, but we do know the value is huge. So that really brings us to one hand, we have now clarity on all these production systems. How far are they off of regular agriculture? So even though we know it's less, at least we know how much do we need to fix. And on the other hand, we also know that there is a lot of other opportunities that farmers can provide if they're also paid in a different way. And what we did in this project is develop a calculation tool that when you start either from a market perspective or from a policy perspective, changing the system conditions, you will see when is the business case actually a feasible business case, and when is that actually a feasible future. This tool I also can talk about for hours, so maybe we can move forward. And this sheet really sums it up. So what do we know after this research? There's a lot of problems that are piling up due to our current production systems. There's a lot of reason to move towards a different system where we can produce bio-based building, especially for our growing cities. Bio-based cultivation is definitely a development perspective, but we need policy and action to make that future happen. And although that will cost, we often do not realize that our current land use also comes with a price, and we're actually getting the bill of that. Recently in the Netherlands we are, but long that was overlooked. So our final bit of research is also on how can we make that future happen. So basically, there's two ways that you could realize that. Either really demand driven, also something that governments, at least in the Netherlands, we've really focused on. Okay, how can we make the market function better? Or there's also an alternative way. How can we pay farmers for different outcomes than just the kilos of milk, or in this case, the kilos of fiber? Can we also pay them for the role that they play in the landscape? So for that, we also came up with a lot of policy recommendations. On the market side, yeah, you can keep the last one. We see really a chicken or egg problem. So we need approaches that attack from both demand and side and supply side at the same time. Otherwise, you will not break through it. We're still missing a lot of knowledge. Over time, we have focused from the thousands of crops that are there. We are now mostly producing 10 crops over the whole world. And we know a lot about that. And that's also why they've become so efficient. And we don't know a lot about other crops. So we really need to start researching other crops as well. That also will improve our efficiency, which also helps the business case of course. And there's a lot of work to do on certification and legislation of using these materials in construction. And one of the problems we also faced in the Netherlands, and now it's already being handled, was that bio materials are also used for biofuel, which is actually really low use in the pyramid of how you should use materials. But luckily that is being attacked now. But broadly, we have we want to be, you see graphs here on the right. For this future to happen, we want this cultivation of crops, we want to be in the green side. And we can either increase that, make that happen by making sure they earn more per kilogram, or that they get paid for societal services for farmers. And yeah, we've delivered a set of recommendations for different kind of governments, or more regional or more national governments, on what they could actually do to also make that happen. And we've also summarized a bit of that, I think, in the next slide. So the top recommendations that we can give is really play a role in the demand side. So for example, the Amsterdam has now in some tenders made bio-based materials obligated, and that really helps the market become more mature. But at the same time, there's also some oil mill needed still in the box of this. So how can you, as a government, set up collaboration between different kinds of the chain? How can you also help cooperation between farmers? And one of the key things that we find is that the risks, if you can make sure that the risk is divided differently, then you're taking away a major reason why things are not happening. So for example, these are really pioneer crops, and for an individual farmer to take the risk if they have a bad year, it's really holding them down. But as a society, we want them to move into a certain direction. So how can you really look differently at who is taking the risk in a transition? And that is really a thing that also, for example, regional investment funds that many of the provinces have can take a role, or different instruments are possible, or for example, land, allowing farmers to use land for these kind of trials. And of course, these are really regional approaches, so you really have to make a development strategy per region. We've done that for 3 now, but of course, there's many other regions that could work in the same way. and where you could also look which kind of crops are best suited for which region, and how can you also collaborate between metropole regions in supplying different kind of building materials. So I think that's our story. As again, we can talk about it much longer, but we also want to have some space for questions. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Daan and Philomene. It's the second time I hear this presentation, and it's even more fascinating than the first time. I think it's a very, very clear message, and also I think very welcome in this period, because we are quite in a governmental crisis, also with this nitrogen crisis. And I would recommend to add another recommendation on your last sheet, and that was this very powerful message of Philomene, that we need more farmers than less farmers. I think this will help also in this process now with in this governmental crisis. We need more farmers. That's a message, and you can of course elaborate on it why we need it. But this will be helpful. Maybe there will some questions, but maybe my first question is: we have this. We are now in this process of the spatial puzzles with Novex areas. We have this Novex area of the green area. Are you involved also in this green heart area with your study? This can help also with creating a good new perspective also for this green heart of the Netherlands. Yeah. Are you involved with this?
Yeah, well, some of our people who were at the client of like Zuid-Holland, they're also involved in that. So as a knowledge product, it has been given as a piece of the puzzle, but we're not currently involved. As our project has finished, our research is delivered, but yeah, we don't have all the answers yet. So yeah, there would be scope for some follow-up there, I would suppose.
Yeah, is there kind of follow-up of this study now?
We are talking about in a different region, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe Philomene knows more.
Yeah, so the next study that we are doing is for the sand soils in the east of the Netherlands, and you can imagine that the environmental issues are quite different. So, well, basically there they suffer from drought, and also from nitrogen problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think we have like the 3 main soil types and the edges of our cities. You can imagine that the problems there are quite different, and that maybe recreational use is much more prominent factor instead of being super efficient with a new crop vegetation or to. So it's a way more difficult in the scattered landscapes around our cities. And I think, yeah, this it is quite promising that at least that the government has made this reserve to spend money on more research about bio-based crops. What we think is very promising is that you solve a lot of difficult issues and combine it. So both for agriculture as for instance, the biodiversity loss and the quality of our waters. So in that case, it's very promising. But yeah, I think it is also still very hard. And that is also, I think, maybe a question to you. How do we implement this, and how can we pay farmers and pay them or give them a better price? Because you see that now it's really not interesting for them to take the step towards bio-based production. So yeah, we need to go towards another finance system. And yeah, of course, that is where our, let's say, professional, let's say, border or boundaries are. And when, yeah, let's say, really the ministries and the provinces and the municipalities are stepping in.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I see a lot of hands already. Maybe Erolostan,
Yeah, thank you. I thought Dagmar was before me, so but
It's okay.
it's okay. Thank you. I just was a very interesting presentation, and that was my question. How far is the research? How far did you involve already organizations from the building organization, the farm organization, the bio-based materials organization? Are they already involved, active in this research or not?
Not in the research as we did it. That was like our goal also was a little bit because in policy makers, they're already quite excited about this. But we said maybe we should do a reality check before you go to farmers and say, hey, you go farm bio-based materials. Maybe we first have to have an understanding if it's actually a feasible perspective for them. So that's what we did. But in another project for a few of the production systems, there is now field labs emerging, which is under a different program. It's called Building Balance, where they're really connecting two ends of the supply chain. But that's only for a number of the production systems that we researched in our project. So some of it are actually taking the steps, but there is scope for much more.
Yeah, and maybe what is a bit of a problem there, and I think that is also so much, built into our systems of how we made our, let's say, the whole agricultural profession hyper efficient, is that, let's say these field labs are not really about how we can combine landscape quality or, for instance, ecology with a very efficient, let's say, crop system. So I think, we really need to start, of course, testing how we can make an efficient bio-based production landscape. But on the other hand, the difficulty is also in stacking these different values. So how can we combine cattail productions, for instance, with a rich ecological system, and how can you also add recreational use to it? And can we also clean our water systems?
Well, I totally agree. And for that, you need data, and those data is available. The only thing is that you have to connect it to your research, and then you can and you can approach it in a more holistic way, because I think that's the only way to achieve this, what you want. So that would be the next step then.
Yeah.
Okay. We have two questions and we are almost running out of time. An hour is quite not so much. Dagmar, you have a question?
Yeah, I thank you very much for this presentation. This was very interesting. Also in Amsterdam, we have a pilot on the horse tail. And we had a lot of resistance actually by the farmers. Maybe the having calculations in the first place would have helped us to cope with its resistance, but I was not involved in that. The thing I wanted to ask is, we're also going to have a pilot now where we're going to look at the governance for this horsetail in our own area to organize it the same way like we want to organize farm to fork strategy. But I was wondering, looking at it, did you have any estimates about, because we also need to eat, right? So farming is usually for food, and we also want to have our food produced in our neighborhoods. Do you have any way of evaluating where you should do farming for food and where you should do farming for bio-based materials?
Yeah, we have looked at it briefly, not too deep. Also in some other projects, I'm not talking only from this research now, because this is a topic we do a lot of projects on, and this question, of course, comes back time and time again. It's really about the skill that you want to look at the system, because if on one hand the Netherlands is exporting a tremendous amount of food, at the other hand we're importing a tremendous amount of food. We have a lot of what we call in agriculture marginal grounds, so grounds such as peatlands where there's not a lot of high productivity for food crops. So if you would combine it, for example, with a transition to more plant-based protein, you would save almost 40 to 60% of the Netherlands that you could use for this. So it's really hard to look at this in isolation. But of course, every acre can counts, and we are looking a lot at more multifunctional systems as well. Also, we research some systems where there's both food production and bio-based production within this research as well. But land claims and land scarcity is a topic because we even have an energy transition as well, and we have some other transitions. It's definitely a big topic, but there is quite some scope, but it really is, yeah, for other ways of land use, but it really, you have to question your assumption as well. Do we want to have this diet of food that we want to offer to everyone? Do we want to look at the scale of Europe, or do we want to look at the scale of a metropolitan region? And yeah, in the end, it can work.
Yeah, maybe added to this topic. So they, like 10 years ago, when we still had VROM, so the Ministry of our let's say the minister at that time was Pronk. He already said that the Netherlands need to be 40 times bigger if we want to, you know, solve all the spatial issues in our country. So that actually, and that was now more than 10 years ago. So actually, if we want to solve all these issues, we also need to be more clever in how we organize our space. So we can't, you know, make these monocultures anymore. We have to stack like program on top of each other, and yeah, so our country is just too small.
Thank you.
Yeah, so big issues now with this transition to tackle with each other.
But just a very, very rough estimate for all the building needs for the next 10 years, with around 40 to 60,000 hectares, you're quite far, and that is less than 10% of the arable grounds in the Netherlands. So to put it in a little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
That's really hopeful, huh?
Yeah.
We can do that.
I see another question in the chat. Maybe Philomene can answer on it, about the where is the question, about the soil subsidence. How do you aim to tackle this? I think you can ask this, answer this question.
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems with soil subsidence is that we used to pump the water level quite low below the surface of our landscapes. And that means that we suffer from, especially in peat soils, of course, from peat oxidation, which is actually causing CO2 emissions. So basically, if we want to prevent peat from this, oxidating, we have to put the water levels up. And that is how our bio-based crops can help, because there's many crops that need higher water levels. So for instance, cattail, reeds, willows, like all these plants, you can just go below -20 centimeters below the surface of our landscape, and then you can actually grow these crops. And we are still suffering with many problems of how to harvest it, because the soil is very weak. But, I think that is one of the big advantages. You know, cows, they don't like feed, and for cattle and reeds, it's much easier to produce and put the water level up and prevent soil subsidence in that way.
And this will also be a challenging thing with the political outcome now, because it's also a political decision now, with the interests of the farmers, of course. So...
Yeah, but I think for me, what's really strong there, and unfortunately that has to be my last remark because I'm already expected somewhere else.
Yeah,
is that this give farmers a future. So we don't say you have to stop farming. We say you have to farm in a different way. And although it's still change, and it's not an easy message, but it's also a future, rather than some of the more conventional thinking. If you want to be quick within 10 years reach all our goals, let's just buy them all out. And I think this is much more a future as well in it.
It's also very expensive to buy all these farms. Huh? So it's better to spend that money on transition and offering a perspective than to just buy all these farms and don't have a plan for what happens after with these landscapes.
So maybe that's a good message to finalize this meeting, to offer a perspective, and we need more farmers. There's also some message in the chat that we like to have some contact for some more questions. We will also distribute the recordings of this meeting. Dagmar, this will be found where? Can you say something about it?
Yeah, we have on the SURE web page, we have a web page on the SURE EuroDelta, and there we will put it on events, and we will also place us on the open research platform from the City of Amsterdam.
Okay, thank you very much. May I? I'm very happy that you give these presentations. Thank you very much, Philomene and Dan. It's really fascinating, and we will have some discussions afterwards about what we can do with it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and all have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you for participating this session.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
For having
Thank
us.
you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.